Welcome to another art class. A couple of weeks ago I gave you some magic water lilies to make out of paper, and at the same time I asked you to try to identify paintings by a French artist who painted water lilies. And his name, as some of you managed to tell me, was Claude Monet. And I am going to show you a few more of his paintings right now. Monet was an impressionist painter, which means that instead of using very fine details, he used little marks of paint to give an impression of reality. Like all impressionists, colour and light was very important to Monet, and he tried to show the natural world in paintings that are realistic, but also explore the emotional effects that colour can create. Based on his work, we are also going to do a painting, and this is quite a big project with several steps to follow, but they are all very easy, so let's get going. And I'm going to start by drawing a bridge across more or less the center of the painting, and this is the focal point of the painting. Really, you should do this using oil pastels, but I don't have oil pastels, and maybe you don't either. So I've got another idea. I'm going to draw it using light grey felt tip. So and it's going from almost one side of the page to the other. Don't worry if the curves aren't perfect, that doesn't matter too much. So as I said, I haven't got oil pastels, but I would like my bridge to be resistant to the watercolor I'm going to put on top. So I've just taken a tea light, a candle, just cut a little bit of the wax from it, and I'm just going to draw that over the bridge, the parts I have coloured. Now, it's quite difficult to be accurate because you can't see where you are drawing with the wax, but do your best. Of course, if you do have oil pastels, you can skip this step and just use them right from the start. Okay, I'm now going to be using paint, so I need to put down some newspaper. You then need to mix some beautiful green colors. Use a variety of greens, dark greens, lighter greens, Here I'm using watercolors in tubes, but you can do the same thing using the kind of watercolors you have at school, and I will use some of these colors as well. Mix some colors first and then apply them to the paper, and it doesn't really matter how you do this. You can do swirly strokes, you can do any kind of mark you want. We are just building the foliage for the background of the painting. What you should try to do, however, is use as many different types of green as possible, or at least 3 or 4 different shades. Adding some yellow here to make a much lighter green. And you should finish roughly under the bridge. Now, I also think it's a good idea to add some shadows to our greenery, and to do this you can use a dark brown, and I would also use a little bit of a red color in the brown, because red is the opposite of green on the color wheel, and the shadow will look more convincing if there is red in it. So yeah, a little bit of shadow, not too many of them, just blots them in here and there. Don't worry if the marks for the moment seem fairly abstract. We will be adding to them later. Okay. But make sure your paper is covered so that yeah, there are no white spaces on the sides or in the middle. It's a good idea to now just rinse your palette or whatever you are using to mix your paint, because now we are going to make a different kind of brush mark, and we should be using a lot more blue as well as the green. But so here I'm mixing a very blue green color, and you are going to add these lines by painting down the page or down the paper. Yep, straight lines moving downwards. And again, mix up the colors. Use a variety of greens and greeny blues. This will be the water. Doesn't have to just be blue, you can have some green in it as well, and probably should have, but there needs to be more blue than green in this part. again, make sure that your paper is completely filled. And again, if you do want to put in some shadows, try mixing a little bit of brown or red with the blue to create the darker lines. Green, and then leave it to dry, of course. Okay, the paint is almost dry, and I'm just going to use a pair of scissors to scrape the paint from the bridge, because as I said at the start, the bridge needs to be very obvious. It's a focal point of the picture. So let me just see if this works. It should do. Yeah. You don't need to use something very sharp, just the end of a pair of scissors or the end of a knife like this would also work. Yeah, but you do need to get rid of that paint so that you can see the bridge underneath. Once the paint has dried, you can also start to add more details to your painting using felt tip pens or oil pastels or pencils. And this time you should think a little bit more carefully about the kind of marks you are making, although they are still marks, they are still abstract. So for example, I can just draw some little splotchy shapes here to represent leaves. I might want to create some leaf shapes as well that look a little bit more like trees themselves, like so. Again, use a variety of colours, dark greens, lighter greens, reds and blues, to just lift your painting and give it a little bit of texture. Remember that this is meant to look like foliage, trees and plants, so you can use leaf-like shapes, but you don't need to spend a lot of time working on the detail. The combination of the marks and the colour in the background should give the result you need. Do the same thing for the water if you want to. You might want to add marks that look a little bit like reflections, for example. if at any point you're not sure about the marks you have made, you can just go over them with a little bit of water, if you are using felt tip, of course, and that will turn them back into colours that look or mingle and mix with the paint. And what about the water lilies? Of course, we need quite a lot of those. And here I would like you to mix up some relatively thick paint, and you can do that with your finger. Definitely do it with your finger, because we are going to do some finger painting to create the water lilies. Of course, you could just paint them with a brush if you wanted to, but in fact, a finger looks very much like a water lily pad. You need to start off larger in the foreground, and then just, if you can do, try to get smaller in the background, which is where the lilies appear smaller because they are further from us. You could also use your little finger to do the ones at the back. Keep mixing the colour and just make sure it's relatively thick. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow now to make a lighter green. Remember to vary the greens just like you did with the foliage in the background. Make sure you add some outside or to the edge of the painting as well, because that makes the painting seem more interesting if something is disappearing off the side of the paper. And again, when your paint is dry, you can add a few details to the water lilies. You don't need much, maybe just a little bit of shadow on some of them. And again, the shadow should really be a dark brown or a reddish brown rather than a dark green. That will give you a much better effect in general. And now we come to the water lilies themselves, the flowers. And for this, you need to have some white paint and a little bit of red as well. That is for the kind of pink highlight in the flowers. But don't mix them together, just dab a little bit of white into the red so that you have almost like threads of colour in the paint. Then use a small paintbrush and just dab the flowers into position. You can see how the red colour is within the white rather than mixed in with it completely. And you don't even need to worry about making a water lily shape. Monet didn't. He was an impressionist, and impressionism is all about giving a sense of an object simply using basic brush strokes. And again, don't worry about trying to draw the lily. You don't have to. Your eye fills in the missing information, or your eye and brain. ones at the front will be larger, just like the leaves themselves should be larger. Dots of paint, a little bit of texture. Who knew that drawing or painting a water lily could be so easy? And that's it. That's your version of a Monet. It uses the idea of Impressionism with some abstract colours and then marks on top.